Hello friends, I'm Josh, and today I want to talk a little bit about um, ethical multi-boxing and how to play three characters of three different classes at the same time in such a way that you're not cheating, you're not breaking the EULA, and that takes a considerable amount of skill. The reason I'm making this video is because there are a lot of people who multi-box on essentially, one class type, a mage, or basically a mage. You've seen some necros around. You see occasionally people will have a better group makeup, but it's not that common. But I think it's really fun, and it's a way to experience content. And I have a small group of real life friends. They play a little bit less than me, and when I want to do content without them, I bring my guys on, and we can go essentially do any level appropriate dungeon. So let's sort of get started on how this setup works. There's a piece of software called ISBoxer that people talk about as sometimes being horrible or the worst thing ever, etc., etc. I think it's a tool, and you can use it however you want to use it. There are ways to set up 18 box mage armies that all press the same key at the same time, and that's essentially, honestly, the simplest thing you could possibly do. Broadcast one keystroke to all your windows that essentially goes to the same hotbar button on each of the characters. It's the simplest thing to do, and it's also, I think, the most disingenuous, and the thing that is a little bit toxic about this server is having 18 in the same class take on a raid boss or something like that. So I don't do that, but ISBoxer provides a bunch of other things. I believe you can cobble together essentially a free version of the same thing with sort of hotkey broadcasting and window management. I'm not sure if there's any way to get portions of other windows on your main screen without it, but that's for convenience, all in the same package. I think it's worth it. If you're interested in something like this is essentially like a hobby of mine, right? So I spend a little bit of money on it. So what do I do when I multi-box? I play a monk, a chanter, and a shaman. I'm leveling a druid right now because I'm not a huge fan of the shaman, and not having ports is kind of a pain in the ass, but this is my setup for now. They're all around level 37 or so. Sort of, I've leveled all these characters myself through dungeons mostly, and kind of doing content with my buds. But these are the guys. They're not super well geared, though I've made a little bit of money through farming Soleil and things like that. So it's not like you need the gnarliest gear in the world to do this stuff. I definitely started with nothing. I was able to get lots of stuff done. The four things that you need to view on each of the characters pretty regularly is whether or not they're sitting or standing, which sounds stupid, but for casters like the enchanter and the shaman, they need to be meting, and so I'm not always looking at their characters, and I try not to alt tab to screens almost ever, unless I need to move them or do something funny with positioning, or they're getting pounded on and I need to root and move or something like that. But I try not to alt tab because it becomes a pain in the butt. There's fatigue associated with controlling three characters, and it's better to just keep yourself controlling one as much as possible. Whether or not they're sitting or standing, what spell they're casting. So if I go ahead and target my monk and then cast Greater Healing, I want to know Greater Healing's actually going off. So you just saw that right here. There was a little piece that's actually my shaman casting Greater Healing. It's any spell, obviously. This is a region of the screen from the other character placed on my main monk screen. You do that through a feature called VFX on ISBoxer, and essentially all it's doing is what it seems like it's doing. It's taking a region of screen from the other screen and broadcasting it over here. Fairly simple to set up. If I hit Control Alt Shift G, you can kind of see these like green screen areas that are set up that can be dragged around. Super ghetto setup, but essentially I have a section for each of my characters. So this is my shaman, and this is my enchanter right now. And this doesn't scale, by the way. There's, you know, you can't have 20 characters set up like this. This is it's a special setup for a small group trying to experience content. So just want to throw that out there. There are people that do that, like me. So every time you like ignorantly state in general chat that boxing is the devil or whatever, it's just irksome to people who try to, you know, keep it legit. So anyway, so there's the caster, and the same is true of my my chanter. You know, if I click on alacrity, more importantly, if I do something like AoE mez or something, I want to know that it's actually casting, that it doesn't get interrupted, and so on. So you have a cast bar. The third thing is your own portrait, or, you know, player frame, whatever you want to call it. I keep this here because while I have a group pane for the most part, sometimes I'm boxing my lower level guys, like for instance, I have a druid that I'm leveling, and I keep my chanter around, and I want to know what my chanter's health is, even though he's not in the group. And there's some special setup later for targeting an out of group member and kind of dealing with those people when you're actually trying to power level or help a group of guildies do something, and you're playing inside the group, but you have your box character outside the group. So I keep a, you know, this setup here. It's also helpful for knowing whether or not they're in combat, because this little swirly deal with the little timer that appears below the name and stuff and such. The fourth thing is what they're targeting. So in this case, they're, you know, my two characters here are targeting my monk. They can target themselves, or whatever. You need to know what the guy is targeting, and this is especially true of healers and especially true of crowd control classes. So I keep their targets here. It doesn't really matter if they're both different sizes. I was finding that earlier on, I found that with the amount of debuffs, I needed a slightly larger player target frame, and I just haven't updated my enchanter to fit the same motif. So these things are all accomplished with something called VFX. Nothing special about it. Take one portion of the screen, put it on your second screen here, and this helps, you know, essentially control these guys and know their state at all times. And it also, you know, you might at this point you might just say, well, why don't you just alt tab? But I'll get into that in a little bit. So the only thing special about the sit stand is that I can actually click on this button. You'll notice that when I drag my mouse in here, it actually is broadcasting my mouse and my mouse position and mouse clicks to the place on the screen that actually has the sit button. So if I tab over to this guy, his sit button's right here. If I bring up the IS Boxer control panel, you'll see that I actually have this little region that's essentially what they call a VFX source or a video source. And then if I tab back over here, that is actually, let me turn that stuff off because it leaves that green screen there. It's actually putting the mouse keystroke here. And that's doing only one thing special. It's clicking on repeater pass-through. When you click on this, repeater pass-through is enabled. I don't have it enabled everywhere. I only have it enabled where I need to actually click on something. There's only 3 things that need clicks right now for me. The sit, pet attack buttons for the characters, and then this is sort of a micro hotbar for the enchanter. And the reason I have this is because I ran out of keybinds. I control my shaman and my healer through mostly keybinds almost all the time. There is no micro hotbar. I'll talk about what keys I keybind, but essentially I found it like a little bit too much to try and bind an entire new character controlling all 3 by keybind. So I came up with this sort of ghetto hotbar. There's only 9 here. What it corresponds to is these 3 buttons here, these 3 buttons here, and these 3 buttons here. That's simple. So essentially, I keep as many important skills on there as I can, and if something feels like it's not, you know, I'm casting it super often, I don't want to alt tab over, I start moving skills around or something like that. I haven't felt the need. There is some pressure to, you know, keep adding buttons and buttons and buttons, but you don't really want to do that. You want to try to keep the controls as simple as possible, while not gimping yourself. So in this particular case, what's set up on this enchanter is, you know, Tash, in this case, Mez, Alacrity, because I'm casting it constantly to try and keep it up because it has a short cooldown. Color Fluxes, there's an AoE stun. Clarity's not usually on here. I usually flop out a buff slot that's a 30-minute buff for something else. Instill, which is his root, pet attack, because I charm a lot on the Chanter. When I'm 3-boxing, I find that, hey, you need damage sources. That's why I have the Shaman as opposed to a Cleric, is because the Shaman can drop on 2 dots or a nuke when he needs to, and his pet is actually a considerable source of damage when she hits 32. So when you're putting together a small hybrid group of 3 that you want to actually do content with, you have to think about damage sources, and I do charm on a regular basis. It sounds a little bit daunting, but I'll show maybe in another video or at the end of this video how I kind of handle charm when I'm boxing. Beguile, which is charm, and this is AoE mez. This is usually, clarity is usually flopped out for like Membler or AoE Membler, because you'll notice I don't have a tank. So occasionally somebody gets angry enough that I can't pull them off with my monk, and so I Membler, and that usually fixes things. And in a bigger group, if I have a real cleric, they're pulling aggro and so on. So there you go. That's it for the basics of what you need to see about your other characters, right? And I'll kind of progressively explain what the rest of the things on the screen are. Next, I want to talk about keybinds a little bit. So on my monk, the monk is a fairly simple class to play. One note about any kind of boxing in EQ specifically, it's different in WoW, I believe, but in EQ specifically, boxing multiple melee characters is kind of a no-no, and the reason is the only way to get them to engage with the target and run at them is for, if I stand up my Chanter here, put him on follow, the only way to deal, he was set up to follow my Druid. Let me sit him back down. I follow my Shaman here, maybe, yeah. So the only way to get him to engage with the target is, let's say the target's right here on your screen. I run at him with my monk. Normally I would just sit in front of him attacking him. I have to actually run through him, attack him on the other side, and then the melee character will attack him from the opposite side. This doesn't work in a lot of cases. In a lot of dungeons, positioning is really important, and you can't be screwing around, running your melee characters through the din and trying to deal with it. But you can. I just don't recommend it. So I have 1 melee character, 2 casters. This is also a reason a lot of people say, oh, just have a bunch of mages. They don't have any melee, blah, 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 your pet tanks for you. I despise that argument. It's just kind of a cop-out for not wanting to control more than 1 class. So there you go. That's my opinion anyway. I know some people might have different ones, and that's okay. I just, the reason people are despise people who play 20 of 1 class is because you're competing for the same content in EQ1. The server's overpopulated, and it's really difficult to try and compete against somebody who sits down 7 level 50 mages on every spawn point in a dungeon like Renii when you're trying to go in there level appropriate and kill something, because they want to farm a 5k item in the Black and Alloy medallion so that they can buy Chrono, so that they can fund their 20 accounts. It's toxic. So I think you should, when you have 3 characters, you should pay for them. If you have enough money later and you're actually doing content, you're actively there, and you're not screwing over lower level characters, go and farm stuff for Chrono. That's great. You're saving yourself $14 a month or whatever it is. So I think that's okay. But when you're doing it en masse and so on, I think people get angry. So anyway, back to, I have 1 melee character, so it's a monk. The reason I chose a monk is because it's a super high damage output on progression servers because of the fist damage delay ratio. I don't have to buy weapons, so having 3 characters puts them a little bit on welfare, in the sense that you have to funnel money into one character or another. So I did funnel money into my monk first, but into armor, so he could actually tank. He's more damage output than any tank could possibly ever want to be. And he does have no aggro generation skills, but I've found that to be much easier to control, especially since I have a Chanter, than it is to deal with slow damage output, and therefore a very difficult time clearing into dungeons because the respawn timer is an EQ1. You have, let's say in Sol A, you're clearing into Kobold or something like that. You have exactly, I believe it's 14 minutes and 55 seconds to get to the next room before repops are on top of you, and you need to be able to clear. So damage output is important, and there you go. So I chose a monk. Um, in terms of the monk and its keybinds, monks are super simple, right? They have like 4 active abilities plus FD. And the crazy part about sort of EQ1 as opposed to say like a WoW, the damage, the stuff that you can basically cast all their abilities at once, and it's a priority rotation. So I've mapped essentially all of his damage abilities anyway into a single social. And it literally turns auto attack on and does 4 abilities, and that's Tiger Claw, Dragon Punch, Flying Kick, and something else. I'm not sure what else. Probably Disarm, I'm guessing, because I spam Disarm. And that's in 1 key. Makes it really easy for me to control the melee character while I'm controlling the other 2 characters actively. Just a bonus, I'm sure I could freaking do a Shadow Knight and manage to have the keybinds associated with Clinging Darkness and Steel Strength or whatever, or some other tank type class. Definitely a warrior, because a warrior is very similar to the monk in that its active abilities are almost nothing, right? You have Provoke and some other things, but that's basically it. So those are the keybinds on my monk. I have melee attack on 1, throwstone on 2, taunt, which it's an unaptly named social for all of my active damage abilities on 3, and then FD on 4, and that's it. So 4 keybinds plus WASD, and then I actually click if I need to do anything else. Generally, that's pretty straightforward. And really easy for me to deal with. If it got much more complicated, I would be binding ERF, VCGT, anything around my index finger, and that's an old habit I had from my WoW arena days, keeping all the keybinds in an arc around your left hand. So the left hand is essentially reserved for controlling the active character plus just essentially keybinds for the monk. So that's how that works. Second set of keybinds is on my Shaman, and what I've done is essentially created a second set of keybinds around my right hand on the num keypad, and it's pretty similar. This does scale to multiple characters, and it's pretty easy to set up. Essentially, what I'm doing is taking keystrokes from my main window and broadcasting them, in this case, to one other window, my Shaman, and they correspond to hotbar buttons rather than specific abilities. So if I flop over to my Shaman here, follow, stand, heal, slow, assist, dot, damage, which is my nuke. Quick buff I don't use, and then root, canny, regen, pet attack. Sow is not supposed to be on here. I don't use that in a keybind sense. Summon companion, I also don't use that in a keybind sense. I do use the malaisement line of spells, specifically when I'm charming a lot. I usually malaise and tash the charm target, or keep it malaise and tashed, so that I can recharm and charm doesn't break mid go. And that's it. So what does that correspond to in actual keystrokes? Num keypad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, basically, and then num keypad plus alt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I want to cast my heal, it was on 3 on the hotbar. So if I target my, let's say I need to quickly target my monk and then hit 3 on the num keypad, he starts to cast greater heal. It's a good point. He just interrupted himself because he was on follow, because I hadn't broken follow. I just did break follow, and I'll talk about how I did that in a second. But essentially, if I hit 3, that casts 3 on the hotbar on the Shaman, and then he heals. If I want to regen, the second hotbar in the 3 slot had regen in it, so I hit Alt 3 and it casts regen. And this is for, essentially all the critical spells I need on my healer, plus its damage output. If I hit 6, it's not going to work on obviously my own group party member, but he casts Envenom Breath. If I hit Alt 6, it casts his second. I don't know if he has enough mana, but it casts his second. It casts his second dot. If I cast 7, it's malaisement, and so on and so forth. So that's that. The non-spell keybound stuff that I quickly went over was 2 is sit stand for both characters, and then I have manual control over them with these two buttons. So 2 sit stand, 2 it's just a toggle. And you know, dealing with that mid-fight, it's nice to be able to just hit 2. 1 in my case is follow, so if I hit 1, it follows, and you'll see in the group chat it puts following, and that was just so I didn't, you know, whatever. I knew it was happening. If I go to that social, it's super simple. Follow Fleck. It's specific to this person. There are like 3 different ways to set up, you know, follow in ISBoxer, and I just chose the very simplest one, hard-coded, and I change these when I need to. That's it. If I go to my chanter, it's very similar. I think he's set up to follow my druid right now. Yeah, target, missive, follow. If I just change this back to Fleck, he will target and follow the right person, and that's it. To break follow. Okay, so to break follow, this is a pretty key point. Since you're running through a dungeon, and then you sit them down at the campsite. Oh, but they're still on follow. So if I target my monk and then hit heal, my freaking shaman's gonna run at him and interrupt himself. It's like a you know, day 1 mistake, day 2 mistake, day 3 mistake when you're boxing. You got to be able to break follow easily. So if I stand this guy up, how I break follow is usually to run him backwards. And you'll notice I did not alt tab to the window to do that. So the other thing I have bound here is WASD keys. So if I hit Control and W, it broadcasts W to the other guys. And this is simply for breaking follow. I don't use it to do anything more complicated than that. It's, you know, occasionally, very occasionally, I'll need to change the arc of vision that my chanter is looking at so he can tab target to the appropriate target in a group. Normally, if it's that clutch, I freaking alt tab to him and start controlling him. But you know, if it's very simple and it's not that big of a deal and it's a small encounter, I'll stand him up and I'll hit Control, you know, Control A or Control D, and you'll notice that he's turning a little bit, and that will change the arc that he's looking at, and therefore what he can tab target. Though I did recently discover another trick is that if you bind sight or whatever it's called, cast sight to your main character from your enchanter, he inherits the targeting capabilities of that character, which is pretty cool because you can control the arc that you're looking at for tab targeting from your main character. I haven't tested that extensively, but I was killing stuff in Kith the other day and noticed that I could do that. WASD, the 2 hotbars, essentially 1 through 8 on the shaman, follow and sit. Those are pretty key. 5 I keep for assist on both characters. So if I target Shady Swashbuckler and then hit 5, both my characters. Oh, this guy again is set up to assist my druid. So if I type in Fleck here, he's my monk. Swap back to my monk and I hit 5. Everybody targets Shady Swashbuckler. So as I'm running back to camp with mobs, I hit 5 and have everybody assist on the same target, and then they start doing their thing to it. This occasionally gets used. To you know, as a proxy way of targeting for that character. I'll stop DPS if there's something clutch to mez. I will stop DPS, rotate out to you know, my monk, rotate out to the target that needs to get mez, target it, hit 5, use my chanter to mez it, and go back. This is all because it's actually quite, you know, it's quite a time sink to alt tab over to the chanter and deal with that. It's a little bit of a, you know, you drop DPS on your main target for a second, but you know, it can be faster. Your brain isn't working as fast controlling 3 characters. It can be faster to deal with crises like that. So that's that. Those are the keybinds on that guy. So the other really clutch keybind is tab target for both of them, for both the characters. So again, with the right hand motif, I have numpad 0 and numpad plus for tab target on chanter and tab target on the shaman together. So I just hit tab target on both of them separately. it targeted some other vendor. And this is, I call it tab targets. That's term from WoW, but essentially if I hit Alto, look at the keybinds, go into targeting, it's cycle through nearest NPC. This didn't used to be tab. Tab defaults to something stupid that I didn't need, like target last target and then target yourself or something, which I just do manually. So I changed it to tab on both guys. So 0 and plus actually sends the tab keystroke to those two windows individually, and they can tab target their own targets. This is essentially the only way you can box an enchanter without maining it, because you need to be able to get at each target in a group and mez it and tash it and root it as necessary, and that's how I do it, and slow it if you need to. I actually slow on my Shaman when my Shaman's in my group, even though it's slightly worse just because my chanter is usually charming, hasting, mezzing, and so on and so forth, and the Shaman has less duties other than healing. So I also find that in a group at this high of DPS, and at this level, I'm not 50 yet, so I'm sure it'll change. It definitely changes in Kunarken and then in Velius. Slowing is less important than just keeping up the pace. So tab target's extremely important, and there you go. Some other tips that I've written down here are page up and page down. So I run through zones that require levitation all the time, like Ocean of Tears, and getting through the harbor in West Freeport. I'm gonna sneeze. Useful feature of headsets, moving the boom up to mute for those of you who voice chat all day. Page up and page down are the classic way in EQ. If you zoom all the way in, it looks down, it looks up, and levitate and swim are both unfortunately linked to your orientation in first person view. So when you're levitating across the zone, you got 3 guys on follow, like the most common thing to happen is to have one of them like shoot to the bottom of the earth and drown himself because you're not watching and he was facing down. So I have page up and page down broadcast to all the other windows, and this is simply so I can just sit in third person view, hold page up, and have every character now be sure to be looking up. And this is so they can all levitate at the same level, or swim at the same level, and so on. So that's a tip. So okay, next things next here. So I have I didn't talk about these keybinds. So shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on my shift, not alt, but shift on the num keypad are targeting group members. So shift 1 targets yourself. It's the same as F1. Shift 2 targets the second person in the group, 3, the third, and so on. I use that for targeting a lot on my, especially for buffing on my chanter. That gets a little tedious as group members change and slots are moving around, and it's kind of hard to remember that stuff. So I created this special bar here, and this is just another VFX source from my Shaman's window that takes his party window and sets it right next to my normal party window. And if I click on this, it actually changes my Shaman's target. So there's 2 things. One is you could just use, if we go Control-Shift-Alt-G and we click on this stuff, this repeater pass-through thing, this would just pass your mouse through. And then that'd be the simple way to deal with this. You just target, fleck, and then hit 3 to heal. Target, flux, hit 3 to heal. That's fine. I set up one extra step so that I didn't have to take my mouse off my, or take my hand off my mouse hand. I take my right hand off my mouse and put it on my num keypad. And I set up right-click healing. So if I click on Flux and I right-click, he doesn't have enough mana to heal, but he would be healing right now. And the way I set that up is in ISBox there's something called click bars. So if I just Control-Shift-Alt-G, there's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 click bars. No F1 click bar. That's actually down here. Special thing because your own health bar does not show up in the party window in EQ1, which is an interesting choice, but it is what it is. So I actually have this separate, just essentially this graphic here that targets himself and his pet, and I right click on that to heal, and then these 2 are reserved just for twinks. So if I click out of group, it goes to a macro here assist twink or target twink or some damn thing. And it was whatever person was out of the group, because I don't have them in the group, so I can't use this click targeting thing, so I set up a special macro to target the twink that's out of the group. Twink. So basically right click healing, and so it's a click bar, and if I flop over to IS Boxer here, all this does, so if I go to heal F1 and then I click on the buttons and I click on the button here, all this does is right click, basically casts, it goes to a specific macro on the bar that will heal the current target. Very simple. That's not even a macro, I think it's just a heal ability. And then left click will do broadcast F1 to the window. So that's the extent of the click button. You don't even need these things to heal. You can use just targeting and so on, and that's it. And then all the other work that I've mentioned, that I've walked through here, is in this. I actually just throw everything into the always on keystroke map, and it's just like I said. All these things are exactly what I already said. They just broadcast keystrokes to a secondary window. In the case of, you know, these hotbars, the hotbar buttons are just, you know, they go directly to the Shaman's hotbar. So don't even need to look at IS Boxer. It's not even that important. It's just about a play style. So that's it for the click healing bars. So if I click, it's very convenient for me to sit down in the group and click on somebody and heal them from my monk. It's a really easy way of getting that job done, because he's usually the main healer when he's doing stuff, and so there you go. Yeah, so the only other thing is the out of group power leveling stuff that I mentioned. These are just buttons that IS Boxer overlays on the window, and they don't do anything other than have an ability that's, or a keystroke in this case, get sent to the window in question. So this is just like a quick way of targeting my Shaman on my Shaman. These go to two other macros on his bar, and that's it. So that's the extent of it. So you might ask yourself, well, why don't you just alt tab? Well, that's cool. This is much faster and better in every way, but I don't think kills any skill, like, at all. So if I'm pulling from some dungeon camp and I've got 3 mobs incoming, as I'm running back, I'm setting up the pull. So what does that mean? Well, it means that I'm assisting on all the characters. As the mobs are coming into the room, I'm tashing the first mob that I want to mez. I'm going to sit here with the 3 mobs. If it's like 4 or 5, I immediately assist with my enchanter and hit AoE mez. Oh, is this going to kill him? Hopefully he's far enough away. Yeah, okay. Might get the shady swashbuckler. I AE mez the targets, and I keep my monk far enough away that, you know, the 6 mobs that come in are AoE mezzed. Then I start tab targeting through. So I start hitting plus, and he starts tab targeting through. And hopefully you don't mez yourself. You've got your monk far enough away that the targeted AE mez is not going to hit your own chanter, but there you go. You start tab targeting through. I start hitting tash, mez, tash, mez, tash, mez. And as I'm tab targeting through, meanwhile I'm DPSing the main target on my monk, and I back him out of the group a little bit just so it's like visually, you know, you can tell who's the main target and so on. And then I'm at the same time as I'm doing this tab target mez rotation on the chanter, I'm hitting things like, you know, 6 on my Shaman, which is to dot, and then I click pet attack because I don't really need a keybind for that, and it's attacking the main target, and we're DPSing the main target. Then I'm click healing, all while I'm like actively DPS, doing my DPS rotation on my monk. If I was like bringing 6 mobs in and then like, oh shit, okay, what do I need to do? I need to alt tab to my chanter. Okay, let's AoE mez. Meanwhile, my monk has stopped using his active abilities because I'm alt tabbed away, and my Shaman's doing nothing. So I'm like AoE mezzing, and then I'm like tab targeting through, and then I'm like, oh shit, my monk is low. Let me go over to my Shaman, and I start screwing around on my Shaman trying to heal. Well, okay, it turns out that my mez is stopped. So essentially, you can do 3 threads of active actions from one window. And really all you need is, like I said, what spell you're casting, what sit stand, you know, state you're in, what your target is, and you need access to the abilities you need to cast through either keybinds or some sort of abbreviated hotbar from the character. And this is where people start, this is where, a good boxer, somebody who's spent some time and can actually control 3 characters with his brain like this, this is where people go, well, boxers suck, they're terrible, and you don't really want them in a group with you. I swear to God, you wouldn't be able to tell. Other than my name is Fleck, Flux, and Flack, you wouldn't be able to tell from a skill perspective. In a normal, white to yellow con dungeon, you're not going to know. I mean, maybe, but it's I can do about 75% of what like a min-max character can do on each of these guys, and frankly, the grandpas and the older folks that are playing this game don't have the actions per minute that I do, and I can actually handle dealing with 3 characters. You might not believe me, but that I've done all the level appropriate dungeons. I was doing Mistmore Princess Room with just this group of 3, at whatever, like mid 30s, 33, 34, and in a full group, we can definitely do it earlier. I was in Saleh at the deepest camps at appropriate level. I was in the bottom of Najna in the 20s or whatever it was. I've gone and done all the keys for all these dungeons myself. And honestly, the biggest part of wiping is like, whoopsies, I was too brazen about follow, and I fell into some lava or something like that. I should have switched to the characters and moved them individually, but I was just being lazy and so on. So the next video, probably, because this one's getting pretty long, will be just about playing this and showing you how it works. But hopefully this dispels a little bit about, there is no automation here. I've keybound every ability I need. And where I haven't keybound, I'm actually just hitting the hotbar buttons. And all this does is take small portions of the other screen and put it on my main screen. So hopefully people understand, are a little bit more well equipped to discuss the nature of this problem. I think, just to end things off on a policy note, I think Daybreak could be doing a little bit better of a job of managing the boxing botting problem by, one, obviously banning the botters, and they've been trying really hard to find those guys that are doing that stuff, and using things like MacroQuest and some of those other programs to control multiple characters at the same time. They've been doing a pretty good job, though I don't know that they have the tools necessary. Guides will come up to me and say, hey, are you botting? And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, see ya. They just send you a tell to see if you're AFK, if you're playing unattended or something like that. They might have better tools, but people still have the impression that people are still botting, and I think they are. That's my thought. So they need to control that a little bit better, and that would help. I don't really think that's the main problem. I think the biggest problem is the lack of play nice policy in combination with six boxing and more mages, where they come into your camp. They're not playing nice. They destroy you and your camp because mages are overpowered in the same way that I think monks are overpowered, right? Monks have the ridiculous live fist table in classic EverQuest, so weapons don't even matter until Luckland, things like that. Mages are also one of those classes that sucked ass in original EQ. I played one to level cap in multiple expansions, and it was a lonely experience where you couldn't get a group. That is not the case anymore. So 6 boxing mages can come in and KS the shit out of you pretty easily. So the lack of play nice policy, plus the fact that people are taking 6 of the same class, or in my opinion, more, 5, 8, 12, 24 mages, 18 mages. I think that's wrong. So I think you could set up a policy that would be box friendly and also community friendly. 3 accounts max. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's less than that. I would be okay with that. But experiencing the content, for me to jump on and be able to form my own group and then invite other people to it, I'm a great enabler for my guild, because I have a chanter and I have a healer / slower, and I have a puller. And so if I'm jumping on in my small real life friends guild, we can actually go do content relatively quickly, because those are 3 corners. Now you can argue that and I think there's some credence to this, that 3 people being generated from one person is screwing up the grouping atmosphere. But Actually, on my druid, I just went and grouped in Unrest by himself a bunch of times, and groups are doing fine, even though there's boxes out there. It's a population thing, I think. People are still leveling on the server. So I think it's a little bit of a moot argument. But I do think from a policy perspective, the number of accounts should be limited. They're talking about a no-box server. I'm not going to play on that server. I think that's boring. And classes like, classes that just can't solo kind of get the shaft if they're slightly more casual. In terms of the time spent playing, right? I'm not level capped already, and it's 2 months past this server getting launched and so on. So I think I'm totally considered casual, though I've spent time setting this up, which makes me more hardcore than your average casual. But anyway, so that's the policy discussion, and yeah, next is gameplay. I'll catch you guys later.